Welcome to today's Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here. We are diving into a truly fascinating chapter of history, focusing on a man whose name is practically synonymous with the American century, Henry Ford. But right out of the gate, we're going to challenge a very common misconception. Our core focus today is exploring Ford's true innovations. Because here's the secret. His greatest contribution actually had nothing to do with inventing the car itself. His real genius was completely reinventing how we work and how we manufacture on a massive, unprecedented scale.
Here is our roadmap for today. We're looking at this transformation across three distinct phases: the mechanical evolution, the industrial engineering, and the socioeconomic impact. So we'll cover before the Model T arrives, driving the Model T, the assembly line revolution, the $5 workday, and finally, the legacy of Fordism.
All right, part one, before the Model T, the era of the letter cars and early failures.
Okay, let's dive into this. I want to immediately bust a widespread myth right now. Henry Ford did not invent the automobile. It's something you hear all the time, but it's simply not true. The car was already a known invention. Ford's real, undeniable genius was figuring out a totally new way to manufacture these highly complex machines in incredibly high volumes. He didn't invent the product, he invented the process that actually brought the product to the masses.
But, that process didn't just happen overnight. True success took a lot of time and a whole lot of trial and error. Back in 1903, his fledgling company put out the Model A. By 1904, they released the Model B. That one was a big deal because it was Ford's first front-engine, four-cylinder car. The problem? It was really expensive and sold terribly. In fact, only 7 complete ones are even known to exist today. By 1906 and 1907, he was just rapidly working his way through the alphabet, experimenting with models K, N, R, and S. And behind the scenes of this whole alphabet soup of cars, there was a classic business power struggle going on. There was massive tension between Ford and his original financial backer, a guy named Alexander Malcolmson. See, Malcolmson favored the Model K. This was a $2,500 six-cylinder luxury vehicle that generated huge profit margins per unit. But Ford, he absolutely hated it. Ford was incredibly stubborn, and his true vision was represented by the Model N. Introduced in that same year, the Model N was just $500. It was a reliable four-cylinder runabout. Ford wanted to build inexpensive cars and just make up the profits in sheer volume. And his instinct was spot on. The Model N became the best-selling car in the U.S., effectively serving as the highly successful proto-Model T.
Which brings us to Section 2, the Model T arrives, building a car for the masses. That boardroom tension ultimately pushed Ford to go his own way, which gave us the ultimate culmination of all those letter cars, the legendary Model T. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the unsung engineers behind the car. While Henry's name is on the hood, the Model T was actually designed by brilliant minds like Childe Harold Wills, Joseph A. Galam, and Eugene Farkas. And just look at the incredible versatility of the body styles they came up with. Even as a strict economy vehicle, you could get a 2-door or 4-door touring car, a roadster, a coupe, a town car, a sedan, or even a C-cab wagon. It was basically a blank canvas. You could get exactly what you needed for your life or your business.
And when it first rolled out to the public in 1908, the Model T was priced at $825. While that was way more affordable than the luxury Model K, Ford still wasn't satisfied. He knew, for sure, that he had to get that price even lower if he was truly going to put the world on wheels.
So, let's jump into Section 3, driving the Model T, a complicated dance of pedals and levers. Before we get to how he actually lowered that price, we really need to talk about what it was like to operate this machine. Because driving a Model T was wildly different and mechanically complex compared to the cars we drive today. If you sat in the driver's seat, you'd see 3 pedals on the floor, but no gas pedal. To drive, you had to perform this bizarre, incredibly physical dance. First, you controlled your speed, your throttle, using a lever mounted right on the steering column. To put the car in neutral, you had to pull a floor lever into the mid-position. To actually get moving, you pushed the left floor pedal all the way down to engage low gear. And once you got going, you completely released that left pedal to pop it into high gear. Oh, and to start the car, you had to make sure that floor lever held the car in neutral, go stand outside in front of the vehicle, and physically hand crank the engine to life. Let's just say you didn't need a gym membership if you owned a Model T. It was literally a full upper body workout before you even left the driveway.
Moving on to Section 4, the assembly line revolution, solving the problem of mass manufacturing.
So, the product was complex, highly versatile, and the demand was just massive. This brings us to Ford's next major hurdle, figuring out how to build these cars fast enough to keep up. He realized a fundamental truth of efficiency, famously stating, "The work to be taken to workers rather than the workers moving to and around the vehicle." To make this happen, Ford's team actually looked to a pretty surprising place for inspiration. They watched how conveyor belts were used in slaughterhouses to move the meat to the worker. It's a slightly gruesome visual, I know, but it's an incredibly effective concept. After a ton of trial and error, they adapted this idea and implemented a moving assembly line at their Highland Park plant in 1913. They literally started by pulling the vehicles down the line with a simple rope, and later upgraded to a heavy-duty moving chain.
The results were absolutely earth-shattering. Before the assembly line, building a car was this slow, stationary process. But once this moving line was perfected, the build time per Model T dropped to a staggering 90 minutes. Just imagine that, a raw chassis becoming a fully functioning, complex automobile in just an hour and a half. And this brilliantly illustrates the direct economic results of all that efficiency. Remember that initial $825 launch price? Well, because they could build them so insanely fast, the price of a Model T plummeted to just $260 by 1925. This meant almost anyone could afford one, including the very guys working on the factory floor building them. Which takes us to Section 5, the $5 workday, a radical solution to an unexpected human problem. Now, this massive industrial leap forward definitely wasn't without its growing pains. The brutal efficiency of the machine took a severe toll on the human beings operating it. And despite working for a hugely successful company, a massive problem emerged. Workers were suddenly leaving Ford Motor Company in droves. Mechanics were quitting, and turnover was just an absolute nightmare. So why was this happening?
Well, the reality was incredibly grueling. Imagine taking immense pride in building an entire vehicle from scratch, only to have your job reduced to intensely boring, repetitive tasks, just tightening the same exact bolt over and over again. We talk about workplace burnout today, but this was a whole new level of industrial exhaustion. The timing was strict and completely unforgiving. If you couldn't keep up with the moving chain, mistakes happened. Cars went down the line missing parts. In the total panic to keep pace, rushed workers were literally tripping and falling over each other. It was an incredibly demoralizing environment. Ford's solution to this mass exodus was completely shocking. To keep his workers, he introduced the $5 workday. This was essentially a profit-sharing payment that more than doubled the daily wage of an average worker overnight. Critics on Wall Street howled, claiming this move would quickly bankrupt the entire company, but they were completely wrong. Not only did mechanics from all over the country flock to Detroit for these jobs, but Ford also shortened the shifts by 1 hour. This was brilliant because it allowed him to add a third shift, turning Ford Motor Company into a relentless 24-hour manufacturing juggernaut. Let's move to our final section, Section 6, the legacy of Fordism, and see how this builds into a macroeconomic shift that changed the world. Because what happened in Detroit definitely didn't stay in Detroit. This era gave birth to a concept known as Fordism. Fordism is defined as large-scale mass production combined with higher wages. Ford realized something massive. If you pay your workers enough, they actually become your best customers. They can afford to buy the very products they are building. This is quite literally the foundation of our modern consumer economy. As workers sought out these high-paying, shorter-hour jobs, other companies across the entire nation were forced to adapt and raise their own wages just to compete for labor. It completely transformed the manufacturing and business world. So the crucial point is this. Did Henry Ford's assembly line ultimately create the modern middle class? By standardizing production, lowering costs, shortening the workday, and doubling wages, Ford didn't just build cars. He built a completely new socioeconomic reality. As we navigate the complexities of modern labor, the gig economy, and AI automation today, we really have to ask ourselves, are we still just living in Ford's industrial blueprint? It's a fascinating thought to leave you with. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the history behind the world around us.